Hello and welcome to another episode of Last Week in Localization, the show where we talk about the latest from the world of localization, whether that's news, research, or events. My name is Sarah Hickey. I'm the VP of Research at Nimdzi Insights. And today I have a very special guest, and that is Raisa McNab, the CEO of the Association of Translation Companies from the UK. Hi, Raisa.
Hi, Sarah.
Thanks for being here. I'm very excited to have you because we've been already in touch a few times, but we never had proper time to chat, I think. It was always business.
I know. So lovely to spend an afternoon with you, and especially when it's talking about the new report. I'm really excited.
Yeah, exactly. Me too. So before we get into that, just for those who don't know you yet, maybe just say a few words about yourself.
Great. So my name is Raisa McNab, and I'm CEO at the UK's Association of Translation Companies, the ATC. The ATC is a trade association of language service companies operating in the UK market. So we've got today 214 language service company members, primarily UK based, but some of our members are also overseas members operating in the UK space. And we are the only trade association in the UK representing language service companies. So we speak for the language services industry in the UK. I'm a translator originally by training, and my career has been in the language services industry, where I've been for the past 20 years. And really, I didn't really know what else to do with my life. I've always wanted to be a translator. I never became a professional translator, but I'm glad that I found all of these other avenues to pursue. So I've been in quality management, production manager, recruitment, and so on. But I've never been a professional full-time translator.
Yeah, I feel like many of us can relate. I certainly can
Yeah.
relate. I'm a translator and I've done some translation work, but I was never a full time translator. But I'm also glad that I found other work in the super exciting industry. So, yeah. Yeah, so the reason we're here today is that recently we jointly published this report. And so by we, I mean the ATC and Nimdzi. It's every 2 years that you guys do this report about your industry for the language service companies in the UK, especially the small and medium providers as well, right? But also the overall language services industry. And the last two times that was in cooperation with Nimdzi Insights. And so anyone who wants to take a look, the report is available on the Nimdzi website and, of course, on the website of the ATC. With a little forward here from you, Raisa, and we cover a lot of topics, as we can see here. So, but before we go into those, I'm kind of curious to know why you guys, and so by that I mean the ATC, why you do these kinds of industry reports. Like, what is the main goal? What are you trying to achieve when you do that?
Well, the UK language services market is so huge and so diverse that it merits a report of its own. Of course, in the UK we follow global trends, and we follow Nimdzi's research and the Nimdzi 100 and so on. Many of those companies are headquartered in the UK, of course. So UK is a global hub for language services overall. But we also have a hugely active, diverse group of smaller and medium-sized language service companies. And so for us, it's really important to be able to map out the UK landscape, because it's such a large market, and because the trends that start globally, perhaps in the US or elsewhere, very quickly come through to the UK, and from the UK elsewhere as well. So for us, it's absolutely critical that we understand what's happening within the UK landscape, and also how global trends and how different innovations and technology come and apply in the UK market.
So then, who is your main audience? Like, who are you doing this for, really?
Well, as a membership association, of course, our primary audience is our member companies. But the ATC report we've been going for a number of years. These past few two reports, we've collaborated with you guys at NIMSI, and it's been really successful. But the ATC UK Language Industry Survey has been running for a long time, over 10 years. We've been tracking the trends in the UK, and essentially our audience is global. Because we're such a central market that
Right.
we find that we've got this report has got a global audience, and a lot of the trends that we see in the UK also resonate elsewhere. So primarily, of course, we do this because we want to add value to our member companies, but the audience is global.
That's a very good point because, of course, the UK is the second largest market in the world for language services. And the largest LSP in the world is currently located in the UK as well, RWS. So it is a very important market, absolutely. And you're completely right. It's not just, of course, there's the industry. People want to know what's going on because we're often, I mean, we all know it, right? We're so bogged down with our own business. So we want to know what the other ones are doing. Am I on track? What should I be doing? But then there's also, for example, investors, yeah, that are looking
Absolutely,
at the industry.
yeah.
I mean, we've seen so much investment and mergers and acquisitions in the industry, and knowing where the trends are and who the different players are, it's very important for these types of, like for that type of audience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And potential investors also want to understand what the marketplace looks like, not just the health or development of an individual company that they might be interested, but where the market is
Exactly.
going to in general. So, I mean, we see that from this survey as well. M&A was one of the trends that we definitely wanted to look at because we know there's been so much activity, and I think we can see clearly from here that M&A isn't just a question or something that the larger players are looking at or active in. It's also the SME companies who are really interested and actively looking at M&A opportunities, either selling or acquiring.
Exactly. So this is actually something that has been, heck, it shouldn't be a surprise because again, we've seen so much M&A activity,
Yeah,
but interest in
absolutely.
M&A is really
Yeah.
on the rise again everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's reflected here as well. I actually just found the graph here. So 1/3 are interested in offers, and yeah, a quarter are looking to acquire roughly. So this is definitely up. I can't remember where we were at 2 years ago now, but it was definitely much higher again this year, the interest in M&A.
Yeah, absolutely. Within the industry, but also outside. And I think partly it is because, relatively speaking, and, compared to other sectors, perhaps our industry has fared so much better through the
Yes.
pandemic and through Brexit as well, that, we are an interesting industry on the whole. And we clearly managed to not just survive, but actually really get through this with a new outlook and a positive trend rather than trying to repair damages.
Absolutely. And it's also, I mean, we are a supportive industry and a transformational industry, right? As our one of our founders, Renato Beninato, always likes to say, we don't create anything from scratch in the language services industry. We always transform something else and we enable communication. So when we think of it this way, it makes sense that our industry fared better than others because we're not bound to just one sector. And usually, even if we are, there's whether there's contracts or lawsuits to be translated, there's always work in the language
Yeah.
industry. So that's why it's also a great industry to be in, and probably that's one of the reasons also why we are seeing a lot more interest from investors because it's such a resilient industry, and that is something that the report has shown again as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I didn't really know what to expect because the early signs, we did over the first pandemic year, we did a monthly coronavirus pulse survey, and then started getting Brexit effect there as well, and it was a very mixed bag. Of course, very early days, devastating off the cliff scenarios, and
Yeah.
then slowly, 6 months on, a year on, starting to see definite signs of recovery. And from here, when we're looking at, and we've got 2018, 19 and 20 figures now, it's just so encouraging that there has been growth, and that we haven't slumped as an industry. And although, of course, when you're looking at surveys like this, there's the bigger picture,
Yeah.
right? And then there's the individual
Exactly.
experiences and the individual environment of companies. And those are really ranging from having a very good year
Absolutely.
to really still continuing to struggle. So we have to also be mindful of that. But as a whole, I
Yeah.
was really positively surprised by what the figures showed us in the
Yeah.
research.
No, I completely agree. Of course, when we're talking about this, we tend to talk about the overall industry and that there was still growth. But we actually do also always mention that there were companies who did not fare well at all, because especially companies that were, either heavily focused on on-site operations and couldn't pivot quickly enough, or their clients couldn't pivot quickly enough, or some companies that maybe were very reliant on a certain client in a certain sector, and that sector got hit very badly, then of course, yes, you are very badly affected. And that did happen. And some companies had revenue losses of up to 70% or more. So had to fire half their staff. So yes, of course, there's also that side. But it is still, despite that, good to see that there is still growth in the overall industry. It just shows that basically the demand for language services, I think, is not going anywhere. It may shift, of course, from on-site to remote, or from one sector to another, and things like that. But the overall demand isn't going anywhere, because it's about communication, international cooperation, and that continues. Despite Brexit, of course, you're the UK has left the EU, but you're still communicating with other countries, so you still have to cooperate even with the EU. So there's still demand there as well. But of course, yeah, there's an impact. We would be lying if we said there wasn't, So actually, speaking of Brexit, let's jump to that section briefly in the report. Let me see if I can find this here. Oh, yeah. Because that was, of course, an area that we looked into, because, how could we not? It's one of the hot topics, aside from when we looked into COVID and also Brexit. And so far what we've seen is that not as many have experienced negative effects of our Brexit yet, even though nobody has said. About 20% said they already experienced some negative effects from Brexit. But what was interesting was that almost 50% said that they were worried about future effects of Brexit. So that maybe, companies saying that they haven't felt the full impact yet, but there's more to come. For example, especially when it comes to acquiring new talent. This is actually something we've been hearing for a while, because we've already started asking about Brexit, of course, a while back. And the most common response that I've received in interviews as well as in surveys was always around talent acquisition. Because, what about the linguists? How easy or not will it be for them to come to the UK and work, or, get a visa? And is it worth it for them? How do you feel about that in your experience?
Yeah, that is definitely something where we haven't seen the full effect yet, because of course very few companies have been actively recruiting over the past 2 years. So we're still waiting for the impact of closing or tightening immigration controls. So linguists, yes, multilingual project managers as well. I've just had a conversation with one of our members today, who's actively recruiting for PMs, and said the number of applicants has really drastically gone down. I mean, what we will see increasingly, of course, and which is clear from this report as well, and from the salary and job market report that Adaptive Globalization has in the report as well, that there will be more focus on finding resources who are already in the UK job market, instead of being able to bring them to the UK from overseas and EU, and the EU especially. So that will be a feature, which is in a way great for the UK job market, in that there will be more work inside the UK, but harder for many companies who've got very specific recruitment needs. Multilingual staff especially. So that's definitely one. I think another Brexit effect that hasn't really run its course yet is this perceived barrier that Brexit has put between the UK and the EU, so that many companies, clients based in the EU, especially at the beginning, perceived it more difficult to buy from the UK, although those weren't real trade barriers. I think the practical elements like VAT, which was a massive issue back in January, just trying to figure out what to do with VAT because there was no government guidance. I think those have by and large been resolved. So it's now more about these longer term effects. And we still haven't resolved the question of whether, if, how UK companies might be able to participate in EU tenders in the future. There's quite a few question marks around that as well. So these are kind of longer term effects that we're still sitting and waiting for a little bit here. And I think this is the uncertainty that we're seeing in the response rate as well, in that there's still something, but we haven't quite seen the end of Brexit effects.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I would also say that probably something that's adding to the worry, I would say, is also exactly like you're saying, the high level of uncertainty, because there's been so much back and forth and so many question marks are still left. So many things are up in the air. And then you're making a good point as well about some of the perceived trade barriers, because there's also definitely a psychological element as well, that some people may go, I don't know enough about Brexit, but maybe there's problems there now because of Brexit. So, that can have an impact. When it comes to talent acquisition, though, I'm wondering, do you think that like the hybrid work model and accessing like linguists abroad, or more clients also using maybe remote interpreting, but also, for translation, people can be remote, of course. Will that be like an asset? Do you think that that can solve part of that problem as well, or will people be reluctant to do that?
I think that definitely will help, especially in terms of outsourced work. In terms of hiring people, I know that a lot of the ATC's member companies are looking or have already established a base in the EU. So that's also to access the markets there better, but also to access the talent pool in the EU. So that's part of it. I think there's, especially now that we've had 2 years of home working, I think that's another question that we haven't quite resolved in terms of movement of employees, which is a lot trickier than outsourcing to linguists who may be based anywhere. I think that's still a barrier for a lot of companies. Either you need to establish a base somewhere so that you can hire locally, or you need to find another way. And we've had a lot of conversation around employment relationships. So what constitutes employment? Are you employing somebody with local rules in a European country where you don't have a base, where you don't understand the legislation, and so on? So those are real tangible barriers to hiring from the EU. And I know that's a conversation that has also been on hold in many companies over the past 2 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, an interesting graph that one of my colleagues put together for the ATC this year was this one here. It's related to what we talked about in Brexit as well. Basically, we asked companies first how affected or not they were by Brexit, and it wasn't too bad. But then we looked at, when we used weighted averages to see where their revenue was coming from, which parts of the world, and then checked who said yes or no to how they were affected. We basically, it's interesting. So the companies that received a lot of their revenue from the rest of Europe, they said yes, they were affected quite a lot by this. The companies that received more of their revenue from the UK, well, there wasn't as much impact. The same with North America as well. So it made sense, the figures, and when we looked at how businesses were affected. Of course, the ones that have more business in Europe were the more affected ones by Brexit. And it actually also stood out that the countries from the EU were the strongest revenue generator for the language service companies in our survey.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I suppose, the language pairs play a role here
Yeah,
in
I would
that,
say so.
translation into English is something that quite a lot of European clients outsource to the UK. But it's also interesting to see the UK figures there. Of course, we know that exporting and internationalization, global export success has been on the agenda with the UK government and the Department for International Trade, who've just last week published a new program to raise UK exports to 1 trillion, and what role language services can play in that. I think it's very much in the UK's interest to continue exporting, but also to grow that export tranche and to get more companies to export. So I think there is a role that we have a major piece to play inside the UK to support UK companies to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. When we're looking at this year's report, was there anything that surprised you or anything that stood out when you reviewed it? You remember? Was there anything where you're like that either you didn't expect or just something big that stood out to you?
Well, what I found really useful and interesting is the way in this report how we combined the two different types of markets. So we looked at the top players, many of whom are of course in the media localization space, and their trends are very driven by AI solutions and audiovisual localization. And then we combine that and the global trends that we've been seeing over the past year or two with the information that we gleaned from the actual survey that we ran this summer, which is where most of the ATC's member companies responded to within the SME bracket. And I was really pleased that we were able to actually see the landscape much better here, combining those two different approaches and looking at it from a trends and opportunities point of view, because this really paints the landscape a lot better. I mean, one thing that really did surprise me here was the proportion of work that creative services occupies in the UK market, and especially from the survey side. So of course on the top player side, we've got all of those creative service companies, but even on the SME market, I've always thought of the UK market more on the technical side, but now clearly creative services are taking over marketing, transcreation, subtitling, audiovisual in general. And I thought that was really interesting because it probably there is shifting there that has been happening over the past few years that we haven't actually really clearly seen.
Yeah, and actually, I think I'm just looking it up here again as well, since you mentioned it, was, yeah, definitely that we see more creative services and that also less adoption of MT, not no adoption, but maybe less in compared to the global big players, which ties in together though, of course, because if you're doing creative services, you're doing less of this more stiff, regulated MT work. You need to have more, well, creativity, as is in the name. So, and it makes sense from my point of view as well that would be more of a niche that the small to medium providers can fill very well as well.
Yeah, and I think this is also, ties really well into another trend that we've been following, haven't we? And that is the shift from transactional work to a more service-based approach. And I think that's clearly visible here as well, in that if those SME companies are to survive and are to compete with what's going on in the market, they also need to be able to provide the deep services and the partnerships that clients are looking for as well. So that was something else that really tied in with this idea of providing creative services and this idea that you're not just selling words, and you're not just selling hours or empty discounts,
Yeah.
but you're selling a partnership that you're providing an expert service.
Yeah, exactly. And this was actually something we already identified in our report, our global market report, the NIMSY 100, that the really big global players are moving away or have been moving away for a long time now from this transactional work and towards more like a strategic partnership for global business with their clients, adding more value by also offering a certain level of consulting and adjacent services like certain packages of work. So for me, it was very interesting to see that this has actually trickled down to the small and medium sized providers as well, in a different form, of course. Because, the most of the smaller ones, they can't offer as many extra services and the big packages. But like you said, they have their own way of moving away from the transactional side and more towards being a real value add and a real partner to their clients,
Yeah.
which I think is essential. I mean, we are in a service industry, right? So
Yeah, and I think we're going to see a lot more collaboration between language service companies around that as well, because there are so many different types of services that you can provide, and quite a few of them require some really deep expertise on providing a particular service or technology, a very certain type
yeah.
of technology. And so collaboration between language service companies and offering that kind of support to each other is something that we definitely want to continue fostering within the ATC. So earlier this year, we had a competition, Stand Out, Be Outstanding competition that was really popular, where we wanted to showcase this idea that collaboration between language service companies and offering services through to others who don't have the internal resources to do those services has actually been going on forever in the industry, but it hasn't ever really been that visible. So this is something that we definitely want to continue exploring in the future. And I think that extends definitely into the creative services,
Yeah.
audiovisual, localization, technologies around that as well.
Yeah, and something I really like about working with associations like you guys, or also we do another report with the Association of Language Companies from the association in the US as well, is that of course, we, for many of our reports, we look at the big players in the industry, and but I mean, we're in touch with all sides of the industry, but with these projects, with the associations, I really like that we're taking a closer look at actually the majority of the market.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
at least like 80%, we can say roughly, are the small to medium sized providers. And so while it's great and important for us to look at the big ones, it's at least equally important to see what the small ones are up to, or the medium sized ones. Especially the midfield is very interesting always to me, because they often have a good eye on what's going on with the big players and where the market is heading, but they also understand the smaller clients as well, and
Yeah.
have that, like we said, the closer connection to the clients maybe.
Yeah.
So that's a very interesting combination, and it actually adds a lot of value to get that perspective as well.
Yeah, yeah. And I think especially in the UK, we have a lot of when we think about a client base and the types of clients who are active in international markets, exporting and so on. A lot of that client base is still very traditional. This might also be one factor on the MT adoption, or the lack of that in the UK. There is also a huge amount of SME companies. The majority of companies in the UK are SME, and they appreciate this partnership that they can have with their local language services provider. So this is also another trending discussion that we've had in the ATC over the past 2 years. Is buying local still a thing?
Yeah.
We always say, oh, we're in a global industry and we've got international global clients, and our linguists are all over the world. But in the UK, there is very much still this sense of buying locally and having those local relationships and so on. This is what we see with a lot of our our member companies as well, that there is a thriving market for language services within the UK and the local regions as well. And this is also something that we want to continue to promote, because clearly UK companies really appreciate that and the type of service that they can get from UK language service companies.
Yeah, and I think actually that's not too unusual. We are in a global business, a more global world day by day. But yeah, supporting local has become more of a theme again. And I mean, something we actually always say as well to people is, okay, to go global, you got to go local, right? So especially in our industry, if a company wants to go global, they actually have to go local into each of the different markets. So to me, that makes sense. You need the local experts as well on the ground, because that's the only way you reach the end users the right way then as well, right?
Yeah, and in the UK there is a huge untapped market of companies who are not yet exporting, who are not yet in the international markets, and this is why there is also such a drive by the government to promote exporting and to promote internationalization, and that is also the place where we need to go into, and where we need to continue to raise awareness that, of course, we've got sophisticated technology, and we're able to service these high volume demanding clients who really know what they're doing with localization. But we also need to support the large tranche of companies in the UK who still need our services. And this is, I think, where we're going to see some interesting growth as well in the years to come, because Brexit has also highlighted the need for this, and the UK government is really driving this very aggressively at the moment. So supporting companies to access translation, for example, and supporting companies to open up to international markets.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of the government, the UK has a very large and I think fairly complex public sector when it comes to language services. Complex because of the whole framework system. Otherwise, it's not more complex than in other countries. And of course, there's always bureaucracy when it comes to the public sector everywhere. But yeah, because just for anyone who doesn't know yet, and correct me if I'm wrong, Raisa, so I'm just going to try to sum this up. But if you want to provide language services in the public sector in the UK, a lot of those are tendered under large frameworks. And so you need to bid first to be part of the framework. And then if you're accepted as an approved provider, then you are allowed to bid on the individual contracts within the framework. So being part of the framework doesn't guarantee any work, but it's like a pre-approved supplier kind of status. And then the different entities like the NHS or the police or, different courts, they can tender their individual contracts under the frameworks that they find best for what they need. And to me, when I first looked into that, it seemed fairly confusing, because the NHS would be not just in one, but in different buckets, and the police in different ones. And how do you, from your point of view, how do you see that evolving? Do you foresee that there will be like more centralization, more frameworks, fewer frameworks? I'm just curious, because it's, for me, all the markets I looked into, the UK one seemed the most complex when it comes to the public system, kind of.
Yeah, and of course there is a huge amount of volume of work going through the UK frameworks as well. So compared to other countries, it may also be that there are so many different frameworks because there is so much volume going in.
Yeah.
That each of the larger frameworks actually handles a huge amount of especially interpreting assignments in a large number of languages. I mean, over 300 languages in the UK. So that's part of that. Honestly, I wouldn't say yay or nay towards whether those frameworks will be consolidated. Perhaps, yes, some of the outsourcing that is carried out by local authorities at the moment will in the future come under the frameworks, and perhaps there will be some consolidation. I think for sure what we're seeing at the moment is a real drive towards industry engagement. So we've seen a lot of really open and constructive discussions within the public services landscape, and the ATC is part of that as well, together with the organizations and associations representing translators and interpreters. both spoken and non-spoken languages, that we're seeing large commissioning authorities reach out and have really meaningful, constructive conversations with the industry, and us within the industry working together to identify, promote best practice, and move the landscape forward, so that we not only resolve some of the issues that we have, but we also think about the future of public services, translation and interpreting 5 years down the line, 10 years, 20 years down the line. And there are lots of different levels to that. But yes, the framework landscape in the UK is quite complex, and that's one of the things that we're also talking about with the commissioning authorities. How do we support SME companies access language services contracts when some of the frameworks are absolutely huge, and it takes a lot of effort into even tendering for those. Mm-hmm. And that's also something that the commissioning authorities are really thinking about at the moment, because of the UK government's, again, drive to support UK SMEs as well. So lots of really interesting developments happening in the UK landscape. But I've been so hugely positively surprised at the amount of collaboration that we're doing within the public services space at the moment.
Yeah, no, that's really great. And I like what you're saying as well, and what I've learned about the initiatives from the government in the UK, that there are these official goals to support SMEs as well, which I think is fantastic, and that should be the way everywhere. So that's really good. And of course, you guys are involved in that, that you represent the SMEs in the language industry in the UK. So that makes sense to me. I wanted to see if there was anything else in our report, maybe, that stood out. I didn't prep myself for this, but I did write the report as well with my colleagues, so I do know it. I just didn't look up any stats anymore in advance. Something like here with this is something that we already found in the NIMSY 100, was that for a lot of the companies, profitability actually increased in 2020. So even though, again, quoting one of our founders, Renato, well, he gave me this quote from someone else, but I can't remember. Is revenue is vanity, profit is sanity. So that even if revenues went down for some companies, for a lot of companies, profitability increased. So here we see that for 40%, profitability increased, and for another 31%, it stayed the same as the year before, despite the challenges posed by COVID and by Brexit. So, which was largely related to savings on some expenses. For example, 43% said they saved on travel costs. In our industry as well, we travel a lot to see our clients, to go to conferences. None of that was needed or even possible, I guess, in 2020. And then, of course, we had fewer events in person or no events in person for a while. The online events cost either nothing or very little. Also, office maintenance. Lots of people moved into their home offices. There's actually at least one company I interviewed for this report as well that told me that they are permanently moving away from a physical office because the work from home model has worked out so well for them that they're continuing down. They got rid of their office altogether in the UK. So I thought that was very interesting, because sometimes it's a little bit of how you look at the bigger picture. Like, yes, revenue went down, but profitability went up. So in that sense, again, it's not so bad,
Yeah, and I think apart from the the obvious savings on travel and office and so on, I think one of the things that really makes this industry resilient, or language service companies at least very resilient, is the business model, essentially, that language service companies typically don't have a huge amount of staff, and the work that they do is outsourced. So it's a lot easier to retain the business model when the number of outsourced words and hours goes up and down. It's scaled up and down in line with work coming in as well. So it's, as a business model, it's a lot more resilient than in many other industries who are heavily reliant on having lots of in-house staff, and we see that from these figures as well, in that 12.5% only have saved on staffing costs, and in other industries it's 70, 80, 90%.
Yes, that's a very good point. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I feel like we covered a lot of ground already. So maybe to wrap up, I'm wondering, well, first of all, is there anything that, again, surprised you so that we haven't talked about yet? Or
No, I think that, the one thing that stays with me from this report is the resilience of language service companies, and the way that global trends and global opportunities on the macro scale also affect the SME companies as well. That there is a clear correlation, but that there are some elements in the UK market that clearly operate differently from the macro market. So we've seen, the rise of interpreting, and we're seeing some shifting towards more non-transactional, more service-related work. We've seen the creative industries rising and everything that comes with that, but we've seen a lot less AI-related services, and that's a macro trend now that we know that is probably going to take a lot longer to filter through to the SME sector. So all of these have been really hugely insightful for me, because of course you follow the macro trends and you look at the big players in the market, and you understand where their landscape is going to. But then the SME landscape, like you said, it's 80% of the whole industry, and that's a hugely meaningful chunk of our industry. That is really hugely important for us to understand also the trends within this landscape.
Absolutely. That was a very nice summary, and I was inclined to just wrap it up here now, but I do have one more question for you. So just what do you expect from the future? Like in this area, of course.
Well, I expect continued growth in the UK market. I expect to see a lot more of the technology for especially creative services to become a mainstay of UK companies. I expect UK language service companies to differentiate a lot more in the future. So either to find their true niche, or to deepen their niche, or to or diversify their service offering. But yeah, really, I see the UK market, UK LSPs really focusing on this service aspect and anchoring themselves within that.
Okay, nice. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking some time out of your busy day to come here and have a chat with me, a very private public chat. So yeah, and honestly though, we've had a really good collaboration with you guys again. It's been really fun, and it's been really insightful for us as well. This is always a great project to work on. So thank you very much. For everyone at home, if you haven't read the report yet, I would highly recommend it. You can just go to our website under research, or you can type in ATC here in the search bar, and this will come right up. And you can also download the full report for free in a lovely PDF format, if you wish. So, thank you again for joining us. Oh, and Oscar, I see you. I see your comments right in my face, the side of my face. Thank you for being so active again and for listening. I appreciate it. Okay, so then everyone, thanks for joining, and I'll see you next week. Bye.